But I said earlier, as entrepreneurs, we have to build our relationship to risk. I think that's true. And we also have to build our relationship to failure in a way that's not shame, that does not minimize us.
Yeah.
My good friend Gabby, I hope you can get him on the show, from Catch, we were all Russell and Kogan. We were all trying to work things out. They would be the first to say that Deals Direct was the first.
Yes.
We kind of, we had this business on eBay, which was quite a big business, and it morphed into a fixed price department store. And so, yes, Australia's first online department store. How's that?
Unbelievable. Let's meet someone who has helped shape the future of retail in Australia, blending psychology, entrepreneurship, and purpose. I'm Kate Save. The Inspired CEO starts now. Welcome to The Inspired CEO, where each episode we explore the innovative wellness practices that are driving success and longevity in the modern business world. In this interview, we speak with Paul Greenberg, a pioneering force in Australian e-commerce, co-founder of Deals Direct and founder of the National Online Retailers Association. From his early life in South Africa to becoming a leading voice in retail innovation, psychology, and mental health advocacy, Paul shares his journey, his biggest lessons, proudest moments, and the legacy he hopes to leave behind. Thank you for joining us, Paul.
Thanks for having me, Kate. I love your shows, and it's a privilege to be on it.
Oh, thank you. And I love hearing your story and learning that when you came from South Africa, you couldn't take anything with you apart from your vintage guitars. Is that right?
That is right, actually. In the mid-90s, when I moved over, there was this thing called exchange control. And as Aussies, we can't relate. Imagine not being able to take your savings, your super with you. But when we immigrated from South Africa, things have changed. There were exchange control restrictions. So you couldn't bring money, but you could bring personal effects.
Right.
So what does that mean? You kind of raid your collections. Maybe you've got a bit of art. Maybe you've got some vintage guitars, some jewelry. You could bring that.
Right, but no money.
I was 35, so it's exactly what I did. No money, I'd sold my house and sold my business, and so it was quite challenging.
Curious too, growing up in South Africa, quite different to Australia. What did it feel different to me? I've got this feeling of South Africa being a little bit more dangerous than Australia to begin with, but what was that experience like?
I guess bittersweet. It's a wonderful country, incredible people, but the complexities of our history there and our politics, I think has affected a lot of people, affected everyone actually. The whole sort of apartheid system was difficult to live in for everyone, not just the so-called beneficiaries.
Yes.
Everyone I think found it difficult. Whether it was obvious or not, I think we all I think felt a bit of trauma from it. But having said that, people ask me, should they go to South Africa on holiday? I say absolutely.
Yes.
Most magnificent holiday ever, and people are incredible. And on the safety side, yeah, sure, you have to keep your wits about you, but generally I think you'd be fine.
Oh, fantastic. So coming here with the vintage guitars, you opened a cafe, is that right?
Exactly. I call it my first commercial failure in Australia. I've had a few, as is part of entrepreneurship. But yeah, I opened up the Vintage Guitar Cafe with a view, I suppose, to exhibiting these lovely instruments. The golden decades of vintage guitars is the 1950s and 60s.
Right.
In the USA. A handful of companies, Fender, Gibson, Gretsch, Rickenbacker, a few others. Beautiful handcrafted instruments. And so I had this kind of vision, I suppose, an early life crisis to start something where vintage guitar enthusiasts could come together and we could talk about these wonderful things. But when my bank manager said it looks a bit like a hard rock cafe, I knew I was in trouble.
Oh,
it's probably not the right thing to say because that's a business that struggled. So I didn't make it, but I enjoyed it.
And so then you got involved in eBay, selling the guitars on eBay, is that?
Yes, it's a lovely sequence. And I guess, part of our chats in the past have been, one thing leads to another. We're on a journey. So who would have known that, vintage guitars, a passion, a failed business, happens would have led to me needing to sell these guitars to raise money. I had a young family.
Yeah.
Someone saying to me in like 1996, oh, you should sell them on eBay. Never heard of eBay. I wasn't a digital native. I guess I was a digital immigrant and an immigrant. And so, so stumbled across and worked out with the old dial-up modems how to work it, and started selling vintage instruments globally.
Wow.
And that was, that opened my eyes to a whole new future.
And that concept, so we're talking back in the 1990s?
Yeah, 96, 97, 98,
Gosh.
99, yeah.
The internet, people didn't really know a lot about it. So to actually be shipping things globally is unbelievable if you weren't tech savvy as well. And I get it if you're an IT expert, but for the average person to be using the internet, sending expensive objects overseas, how did you guarantee those transactions and get the money and know it was safe? And
you know, it's a great question. Well, first of all, it was trial and error, as it still is today.
Yes.
You know, learning by doing. But I'd have to say, and this might sound strange, in those days, because it was less ubiquitous, there was arguably, especially in eBay, a trusted community of collectors. I mean, eBay's early years was hard to find, the rare, the collectible, the hobbyist, and people did the right thing. I would ship guitars worth many thousands of dollars before I got paid. You know, because obviously, you know, to the other side of the world, to Birmingham, Alabama, and Tokyo, Japan, and you know, there's a whole global network of collectors, and I still dabble, still love it. And so, you know, to me, I'm not saying eBay has become less trustworthy, but the net has become less trustworthy because it's just too big. You know, it's an amorphous thing now. But back in those days, I can't explain it. I had no problems, no fraud, no issues. But yeah, it was interesting to learn.
People were there for the right reasons.
People were there for the right reasons. It was quite pure, you know. The innocence is over, but it was quite pure in those days. But the tech was challenging. You know, I suppose no excuses. I would have been in my late 30s, so I could still get my brain was functioning quite well, and I sought help where I needed it, and that was a great story, which then led to a friendship and a partnership with eBay, which then led to Deals Direct in 2004.
So for people that don't know Deals Direct, how would you describe that?
Well, you know, I'm very proud of Deals Direct. It still exists today, much smaller business than it was then, but essentially it was a pioneer, you know, and I had lunch yesterday with my good friend Gabby. I hope you can get him on the show from Catch. We were all Russell and Kogan. We were all trying to work things out. You know, they would be the first to say that Deals Direct was the first.
Yes.
You know, we kind of, you know, we had this business on eBay, which was quite a big business, and it morphed into a fixed price department store. And so, yes, Australia's first online department store. How's that?
Unbelievable.
Thank you. I'm very proud.
Yeah.
Very proud.
And thinking back to you leaving your country to come here to a cafe, and then, you know, very soon after really pioneering a space that actually coming up with that idea is just phenomenal, because it wasn't there. It's not as if there was a heap of other businesses doing this. It's that innovation, that aha moment. When did you know that that's something that you were going to do? And did you expect it to be big, or was it still the hobby?
Well, you know, with you, I can only tell you the truth. It was a kind of stumbling journey. I wish I could say to you, yes, I had a vision crystal clear and I could see the way forward. It really was an iterative sort of learn by doing, day by day. And I think most entrepreneurs you speak to on the show would have had no idea how successful their businesses would have been. I know you chatted with Jack Gantz and some of the great entrepreneurs in this country. You know, we start something and it takes on a flywheel or it takes on a snowball, and we roll with it. And that's how it worked with me. I'm very much the accidental entrepreneur, and not embarrassed to say that. So I'd say, yes, it turned out to be very big. Most excitingly, I think it inspired other entrepreneurs like Russ and like Gabby and many others, and marketplace operators. I was the chairman of MyDeal before we sold that business to Woolworths. And these are all businesses that came well after me, did it better, and very generously will say to me...
But you took the risks first.
Exactly. Very generously, Kate will say to me, thanks, Paul. You know, you kind of shone a bit of a light, and you gave us a bit of a roadmap when there wasn't one.
Yes.
So I'll take that.
Yeah, and that is that that big risk and being first, and often the people that go first don't always make it because they're the sacrificial lamb for everyone else to go, that went wrong, but to actually keep going through.
I think that's very important for your viewers. It's a great point you make. The first are not always the ones who are the biggest beneficiaries. So I guess, you don't, what's the point? You don't have to be first. There's some argument that second or even last mover advantage can pay. It's a bit like these, pass the parcel,
Yeah.
So perhaps, my advice to entrepreneurs or anyone, who wants to go out on their own is sometimes too early is probably not good.
Yes.
Too late, also not great. The middle of the pack's not a bad place to be.
And how much risk did it take for you? Like, was there a moment when you thought, do I go all in or should I hold back? Like, did it feel risky at the time, or were you just happy to sort of blindly go with it and see what happened?
Well, that's again a big question. Look, I think a lot of entrepreneurship, a lot of business is how we relate and deal with risk. I'm sort of a little bit, I wouldn't say I'm a gambler, but I don't mind risk. I kind of like it. There's something about it, the endorphins, the windorphins, as we say. So, but again, I think, good entrepreneurs say yes. Obviously, have guardrails, not crazy, but manage the risk in more of a backfill kind of way.
Yes.
So again, if we're overly sensitive to risk, we probably won't do what we could do, but if we totally ignore it, I think we can end in tears. So again, there's something so nice about the middle ground, especially as I get older.
Yeah. And I think of that now that perhaps a conditioned CEO would go into business looking at the P&Ls, looking at return on investment, looking at how many years to generate whatever it is they're trying to generate.
Yeah.
But when you're moving first, you don't have that data.
Yep, and that's what I love about business, and I've seen it in what you do. I think the best thing about business is the creative side. I think it's a very creative endeavor. So the brands that you've built and are building, yes, of course, there's a commercial framework, but the creativity, the vision is what I love the most. And so, yeah, we all have different strengths, and I suppose having good people around us who complement us. But I love the creativity, and often that requires a little bit of letting go to the traditional frameworks, the traditional business plan.
Yes.
It has a place, don't get me wrong.
Yes.
But sometimes you just have to push through and
see beyond.
It's a bit of heart as much as it's, head.
A lot of people listening to this too may be working in their business at the moment, thinking about exiting one day or thinking about what happens next.
Yeah.
Take me through that journey of when you realised that you could exit this, that this wasn't a forever business. You weren't just going to work in this until the day you died. Like, when did you have that moment of something's going to change?
Well, again, I think we all take different views. By the time I exited Deals Direct, which is in the cusp of 2012, 2013, we were acquired by Ellison Capital, very well-known VC firm, and Caledonia had bought Grays Online, which is kind of a somewhat complementary business. They put them together and listed them, and that's when I moved on. But it didn't. I was already, I would have been 52. I don't mind, so I was late in my career. No complaints, no regrets, and so I had to take a little bit more, I suppose, of a forceful approach, which is what they call running a process. So recognizing where I was in my journey, that I'd been at it for a good decade.
Yes.
Not a long time, but when you're getting older, time's a little bit more compressed. And just mandated a corporate advisor. He and his firm ran a really good process. We spoke to interested parties, and we went with the one that was the most attractive. So it was quite conscious. I'd have to say, though, before that, I got a bit immersed in the journey, and I wasn't too focused on it. So sometimes you just wake up and you say, whoa, there's the station, I better wake up. And I think that's what kind of happened,
And I think that moment of when you move the business on, people often look towards the end as if this is the best thing that's ever happened. But I've heard many people say it's often their lowest moment, because that whatever they think is at the end of it, this magical bliss feeling doesn't feel like that. There's an emptiness or a longingness or a sense of purpose that changes. What did that feel like?
Well, I think that's incredibly true. Because exactly. You think, well, I'll get a nice big check, and I won't have
Yes.
the same pressures and
Yeah.
responsibilities. But as humans, we're creatures of habit, and suddenly you're kicked out of that routine.
Yeah.
You're kind of driving out of the driveway of your warehouse or big
Yeah.
building for the last time, and you think, well, now what?
Now
So
what?
I did
Yeah.
have that moment.
Yeah.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
I had that moment, and it's quite can get quite gloomy actually. And then of course, as humans, our mind plays tricks. Was it the right thing to do? Were the terms fair, just, and equitable? Could have
Oh.
been better. All that stuff. I mean, we all
Oh.
play that game. But fortunately, then I had the greatest blessing of being inspired by some of my colleagues. They said, "Well, you're the old guy of the industry," which I take as a great compliment, the
Yes.
grandfather. Why don't you start an association for online retailers? I thought,
Ah.
well, I don't have a background in associations, and but the feedback was that's going to be your biggest strength because the established associations, no disrespect, I was on a board of one of them, have a fairly more structured, traditional approach to the world. But let's face it, online retail was a disruptor.
Yes,
So
that's
surely
right.
the association and networks that serve it need to be a little bit different, right?
Yes.
So I think I was very fortunate to have been encouraged to do that, and that's been great.
That's really interesting too. So it's the people that you surrounded yourself with that helped you find whatever it was to come next.
Well, totally. I mean, friends, even old frenemies. We keep bringing up Gabby, and you must get him on the show because he's a great guy. He said, come on, you've been around, off. And I'll tell you the backstory to that. When there was a bit of a news piece on online, and we're talking 2012, 2011,
Oh,
2010, Rustin Kogan was doing something, and Jerry Harvey said he doesn't know what he's doing. These were interesting times. I would get the call from Channel 9 or Current Affair or ABC News saying, give us your view. So I had my Deals Direct hat on, but they didn't really want that. So I spoke
Yes.
about the industry.
Oh, right.
So there was a natural sequence, if you like, to become a bit more of a spokesperson for the sector. And so they were encouraging me. Remember now, of course, sometimes, well, NORA, has new leadership, fresh vision. Katie Derritt's our CEO. She's amazing. She recognizes there's really no such thing as online retail anymore. We're all, it's all retail.
Yes.
Who's offline?
Yes, that's
so
right.
the association, which now just goes under the acronym NORA,
Yes.
I don't think anyone really knows what it means anymore, has kept up with the changing face of retail, which I'm so proud of. But back in those days, it was Rustin Kogan and Jerry Harvey fighting it out.
Oh, so interesting.
Yeah, and I guess at some level they were kind of both wrong. And I like them both and have huge respect for them. But the game's played in the middle.
Now, I heard you recently say that something you were very proud of was when someone came up to Katie and she must have mentioned Paul, and they said, who? And she said, well, Paul, who founded? And they had no idea that there was Paul behind it. And you said that was a moment that you really,
proudest moment.
Yeah.
Because, Kate, you would know only too well, Beefit Foods is a wonderful business, great product, we use it. If it's overly associated with you, which at the moment I think it is, and no disrespect, over time you kind of weaken the brand equity of that business. Because what happens when you decide to take the kids off to Greece for 10 years or to Italy, So the idea of using our personal brand, and you've got such a powerful one to build our businesses, but then also know when it's time to, hand over. So one of our early board members at NORA said, NORA's got one big strength and one big weakness, Paul, and they're both you. It was lovely, great feedback, meant with love, care, and concern. So that is an inflection moment, and just for your viewers, where, I carried that anxiety for quite a long time, and then Katie Derritt, who's our CEO, said, someone came to the event, younger, of course, the next gen, and she said, well, I'm sorry, Paul Greenberg can't be here. They said, who the hell's Paul Greenberg? I said, we've arrived. Do you know what I mean?
So good. That's right.
Yeah.
Because then the organisation stands on its own 2 feet, and the brand has not many people would know who the founder of Coca-Cola is. I'm like, I've seen the name, but I don't really know. But Coca-Cola stands on its own 2 feet, and it probably has for many, many decades.
Exactly. Who started David Jones? They said so true, and I think So yeah, so I think I subscribe a little bit. I know one of the questions that I often get asked is, how would you like to be remembered? It's
Yes.
a powerful question.
Yes.
I'm into insignificance theory, and
Oh.
in fact, my 24-year-old son Max has got me subscribed to it. That really we're just here for a fleeting moment. Don't spend too much time worrying about that. Obviously, do good things, be a kind person, but you actually won't be remembered. So,
Insignificance.
so that's the
Wow.
insignificance theory. A lot of coaching, a lot of personal development is how significant we are as humans, and of course we are, but I think we sometimes go too far in recognizing that. I think there's a lightness about recognizing.
The self-importance being
Yes,
so much more than what it really is.
it can be healthy,
Yes.
but I think it can also get unhealthy.
And that's something a lot of people don't know about you is your psychology background.
I've dived myself in, yeah. So I've been a registered psychologist for many, many decades. I wouldn't say I'm necessarily a practicing psychologist, but I still have my registration. I keep up with, whatever professional development's required. And I just find it very interesting, an interesting profession.
Yeah.
And
It's learning about people.
It's learning about people. And, we spoke a bit earlier. I'm actually writing a book, if I can give a little bit of a plug.
Yes, please.
Although I've got a bit of writer's block at the moment. And I'm calling it Strings to Rope. And really, it's a business book about our careers, how they're a mosaic. Not for everyone, because many of us, my dad did one thing his whole life. Maybe your parents did one thing, or your working parents. In the world we live in today, and for a lot of people, including you and me,
Yes.
I think we love the idea of a mosaic, of doing different things.
Yes.
So we know that you've got, 4 or 5 things on the go, and I celebrate that. Psychologist, retailer, vintage guitar collector, the list board advisor.
Yeah.
I think there's something very glorious for some people about that mosaic. And I'm saying to, my son and anyone who listens, those little strings become a rope. Don't worry about them. Just keep knotting them.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
and it'll all come together and you
does.
don't need to figure that out.
It does. It does. So why would you open a vintage guitar cafe, Paul? Why would you end up going, working with eBay? And then why would you end up keeping your psychologist registration? And well, it all comes together.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah,
I heard a really good analogy the other day with when you're going down a river and then you hit a fork in the river and it will always try and pull you towards the waterfall.
Yeah.
But that thought to me is that always taking that other path, and my dad would call that the hard road. Always take the hard road. Dad's 82 and
God bless him.
barely a phone call would end without Dad asking me if I'd taken the hard road today.
Wow.
It's nearly every day.
Wow.
And I always think about, no, paddle harder and go the other way. And the thought that came to me is, what's at the end? Actually, no, there's no end. There's not just this great big, pond of, you're going to actually keep paddling and keep paddling until you decide you can't paddle anymore and off you go down the waterfall.
Exactly. And insignificantly.
Yeah.
But I think that adventure, as you go down the waterfall, you'll look back and say, wasn't that glorious?
Yes.
Because I took the hard paddle. I took lots of different paddles.
Yeah.
I did U-turns. I pulled out of potholes in the river, and rapids.
And
what
where
a
are they
glorious
going?
journey. What a glorious journey.
They're not going anywhere. We all start the same place, end in the same place.
Correct.
And
I think
just keep paddling.
Such good insight. Enjoy the journey. We're all taught to live in the moment. It's not easy to do, but I think that's a brilliant metaphor. I might steal that for my book if I can.
Absolutely. Well, you don't need to credit me. You've come to I've only just put it all together in my head.
Yeah, strings to rope.
Yes.
Take the hard road or the road less traveled, and just it's a glorious adventure.
I love that. And anything else, I guess, thinking about your journey, because you've had so many iterations of, not just moving countries and starting a new business is one thing, selling things globally, going from cafes to retail, online, organisations. What is it about? What brings you joy? What are you looking for when you do something and you know it feels good? Can you put that into words?
I kind of wish I could, and I do get asked that sometimes. I think sometimes as we get older, the beauty is often in our family and, you look at your kids and say, gee, they're great and they're great people, and I would choose
how
them as
many
friends.
kids?
I've got 2 boys and a daughter in the blended family.
Yes.
So Adele has got a lovely daughter and I've got 2 sons,
Yes.
excuse me. And so I often look at them and say, well, you did all right,
Yes.
and they're good kids, good young adults, they do well. But, there's nothing specific. For me, Kate, the building is what I enjoy. So, in a moment of self-awareness, I like starting things. I don't like running things.
Yes.
So, put me in for a couple of years, and then push me out, push me down the rapids, push me down the river. And that's really it took me a while to work that out. No complaints though, but what I do like is starting things. Taking the germination of an idea and then seeing it grow into something and then essentially handing it over. I guess the second thing I've learned is that I'm actually the best pulling up alongside smart people, smart founders, and without getting in the way, trying to enable their journey. And I've had quite a lot of success in over the last 10 years since I've been out of my own business doing that. And that's been a great privilege. And I guess, that's probably what I'll do for the next 10 years.
And a lot of people are scared of failure, and you've had what you would call a failure with the cafe.
Sure.
What do you learn from that? How do you move forward from that? Because I think people are so scared of failure that they never start something, but helping people to go, it doesn't matter. That's, what's in that? What have you learned?
Well, I think the cafe was only one failure in a series of many. So when you do different things, strings to rope, right? You got to expect there's a statistical reality that there will be failure in your path. And that can be quite liberating, actually. That traditional kind of salesperson who says, I don't mind the knockback because I know I'm only 3 calls away from a yes. There's something to that psychology, And I think it's the same with failures, that if you, a lot of venture capital only like to back founders who've had some failure in their framework, in their narrative. Because that's where we get our learnings from, that's where we get our insights. But I said earlier, as entrepreneurs, we have to build our relationship to risk. I think that's true. And we also have to build our relationship to failure in a way that's not shame, that does not minimize us. That certainly we need to be able to look at ourselves and say, did we do our very best? I call it best endeavors. It's a lovely word, two lovely words. When things don't quite work out, just look at yourself and say, were best endeavors applied by me and the people around me? If the answer is yes, it's not a failure.
So true. And helping people to pick up from something like that, if they've just gone through something that they think, I can't do that again, how do they find the will to pick up? Like if you've been hit really bad with some business news, something that didn't work, how do you give them confidence? What is it to keep going?
Well, I guess, if I was their psych or their shrink, which I'm not, I would encourage them to consider what I've just said, which is really be reflective in the journey. What did I learn from that? Don't shame yourself or the people around you for the fact that that it didn't quite, I guess, define success. What does that really mean anyway? What does success really mean?
Yes.
So even for those people that we look at as successful, are they living a life that is nourishing? And so you've got to look at the whole picture. But how I've dealt with it is, certainly also being able to grieve, actually say, well, that was a hard run, that hurt, that stung, and go a little bit to the feeling. We're taught in psychological services not to push things away, let them come in, own them, hopefully soothe and heal them, and then move forward. But the failing forward mantra out of Silicon Valley. Not everyone believes in it, and I think people misunderstand it. Really what it is strings to rope. One thing leads to another, and it's a sequence, and then we go over the waterfall, which I really like. That's where it all ends.
And I love that, embracing it as well, and the emotions that come with that, and the sitting with the grief, because sometimes you in life you have to go through things, don't you? So you can't sit before it and hope that it's not coming, because it will eventually come.
Exactly. And write a book. I mean, so in the cusp of the Deal's direct journey into NORA, I wrote Africa to the ASX. It's a short book. I've got a short attention span. And I didn't think anyone would be interested in reading it. I wrote it for myself. Bit of a Bridget Jones' diary for me. And yeah, people love it. I mean, when I say love it, it's very short. I know Gabby's written a book. Lots of people have written a business book, and it serves two purposes. One, it can heal, but also, people take if you write authentically and openly, you can help other entrepreneurs.
Yes.
See that they're not alone, and B, also perhaps avoid some of the rapids that you
Yes.
spoke about in the river.
And beating yourself up over things, because everyone goes through this business journey. Nobody has a straight line, and I think that the media leads us to sometimes believe that's what it looks like, but it never is. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the media and social media, unfortunately, tend to
Yes.
sanitize a lot of journeys, but I think we're all too smart for that now. We know that life doesn't work like that, and
Yeah.
you certainly can't get lost on a straight road.
No.
So get off it,
Yes.
Go get lost.
And very last, so obviously having NORA during the COVID lockdowns in that period, what do you think was, a really big learning, watching all of the businesses struggling and absolutely fighting, whether it's to get online and take advantage of the sales or not being able to get the stock? But as a whole, leading an organisation where you've had so much communication with so many businesses, what do you think people can take from what we've been through with the lockdowns?
Yeah, and I'm glad you've raised it, because sometimes we don't talk about it, but it's not over emotionally, mentally, physically. I think we're still feeling the impact. But I think, just for context, by that point, God bless her, Katie Derrida was running NORA.
Yeah, right.
And she very quickly pivoted into a sort of digital first network. And so we ran some sizable events virtually. Interestingly enough, our very generous solution partners and sponsors still had a bit of budget, and they put it in. The cost of delivering that product was less. So actually NORA was in good shape financially, which, I think Katie should be very proud of herself and the team. So they ran sort of, as I say, digital first, did a great job of it, some enormous learnings. Obviously, there was pain and hurt from the whole dislocation, from the rupture, really. We were sort of spun off our axis. But I think we've come back as a community, as an ecosystem, as an industry, as a society, in many ways, strong and resilient. But I don't think, that we shouldn't forget those that, have not been able to adapt as well.
Yeah.
I think there's still a lot of hurt there. And if we can help those people, reintegrate, feel connected again.
Yes, and
It
that
was a real
support is
rupture.
everything, isn't it?
Everything.
That having that community where people could talk. And I think I obviously met you through the Australia Post Consumer Advisory
that
group
council.
with NORA. Yes, and I think I found that really, really empowering, because as an online business, knowing that other people are having the same struggles, and they all seem to be very similar things with delivery and 3PLs, and that ability to get the product as you intend to the person is not as straightforward as it always seems.
So true. I mean, you've raised it a few times in today's chat that sometimes, we on these journeys we feel alone, but we're actually not.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing and coming here today, Paul.
Thanks, Kate. I enjoyed the chat.
This is The Inspired CEO, and we'll be right back.